So this revision video is designed to help you revise the character of Lady Macbeth. Okay, so a really good way of revising characters in Shakespeare's plays is to go back to Freytag's triangle, that dramatic structure of how the play is sort of organised. And the reason for that is you're going to need to show an awareness of how that character changes or develops as the play's plot progresses. So let's firstly recap on what we mean by Freytag's triangle, and I would like you to write this down as we go. Well, we've got exposition. Now, the exposition normally happens in Act 1. It's just the introduction, if you like. Then there's an inciting incident. So something sparks the rising tension, which leads to rising action, which normally happens in Act 2. At the top of this, we have the climax, the peripeteia, the reversal of fortune in Act 3, which is followed by the falling action in Act 4, with the denouement or the conclusion in Act 5. So it's really helpful to understand how Lady Macbeth is characterised in each one of these acts, so that if we got a question in the exam, we would be able to show our knowledge of how that character has developed. Okay, so as we go through, I'm going to keep in the right-hand side of my screen where we are on Freytag's triangle. Okay, so we're now in Act 1, the exposition. So I would like you to now pause the video and I would like you to read through this extract. Now, if you feel confident, I'd like you to answer that question on the screen. How does Lady Macbeth transgress societal expectations of her gender in Act 1, Scene 5? In other words, what are her comments on her own gender here? Now, if you do need a bit more guidance, I'm going to put some questions on the board, so continue watching, and those questions will help you answer those questions. So, what are these images symbolic of? Okay, so unsex me here, woman's breasts, take my milk. What is the quotation in blue a metaphor for? What does it mean? What does that phrase in green mean? What does Lady Macbeth mean? So pause the video now and consider those three questions. Okay, so essentially what underpins this speech is Lady Macbeth's ideas of womanhood. Now, womanhood is symbolic of nurture. So she says that the nurture elements to her, her nurturing qualities, prevent her from acting cruel deeds. And so she asks the spirits to take her womanhood away. So a Jacobean audience is quite worried by this because she is actively going against what was expected of her gender. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to pause the video and I would like you to read through this speech from Act 1. And I'd like you to write down a list of adjectives that you could use to describe Lady Macbeth from this speech. If you feel like you need a bit more guidance, that's okay. Continue watching and I will put some ideas on the board. But if you feel confident, please press play at pause now. Okay, so if you need a bit more guidance, have a look for a quotation in that speech that would prove that Lady Macbeth is manipulative. Find a quotation from that speech which would show that she's authoritative, that she takes the lead. Find a quotation from that extract which shows that she's ambitious. And find a quotation from that extract that shows that she is cruel or barbaric. Okay, so let's move on to Act 2 now. So we're now at the rising action part of Freytag's triangle. And I would like you to look at the two quotations on the screen now. You've got Macbeth on the left-hand side, Lady Macbeth's response on the right. And I want you to think about how Lady Macbeth is crafted as the antithesis of Macbeth in this scene. So antithesis, remember, just means the opposite. Now, what I would suggest is you're going to need to keep in mind this idea of gender roles here. That's going to help you answer that question. So pause the video now and just jot down some ideas about how Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are presented as different, as opposites, as the antithesis of each other in these examples. Okay, so it's all about Jacobean notions that femininity is weak, masculinity is strong. So Shakespeare switches things up here. Lady Macbeth adopts the masculine quality of strength, whereas Macbeth adopts the Jacobean notion of femininity by being weak. Okay, so we're now at the top of Freytag's triangle now. We're at Act 3, the climax, the peripeteia, okay, the reversal of fortune. Things start to go wrong at this point and the downfall follows. So remember that in this scene, Macbeth and the audience are the only ones to be able to see Banquo's ghost. Lady Macbeth does not see Banquo's ghost. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to pause the video now, and I would like you to write down how Lady Macbeth appears in this extract. Now, if you need a bit more guidance, then continue watching, and what I'll do is I'll put some more guidance on the screen. Okay, so in what way is Lady Macbeth reassuring to guests here? So find a quotation to show that she's trying to reassure the guests at their table. Find a quotation to support that she might be quite angry at Macbeth. And then find a quotation which shows that she might appear quite confused. Okay, so we're still sticking with Act 3. We're still in the climax. We're still at the top of Freytag's triangle. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to read through this speech, and I'd like you to pause the video now. If you feel confident, pause the video again and answer the question on the board. How is Lady Macbeth presented in this speech? If you need a bit more guidance, then please continue watching and I'll provide more questions to help you answer that question on the board. Okay, so look at that quotation in red, sit worthy friends. How does this imperative sentence, this command, highlight Lady Macbeth's attempt to control the situation? The quotation in blue, how does the dramatic irony undermine Lady Macbeth's attempt to control the situation? And look at that quotation in green, it's the stage directions. Remember, asides are dramatic features, so she is only talking to Macbeth at this point. How does this aside emphasize that Lady Macbeth is losing control or authority within the relationship? So pause the video now and answer those questions. Okay, so it really is all about dramatic irony in Act 3. Okay, remember, dramatic irony is when we know more than a character on stage. Now, the dramatic irony isolates Lady Macbeth. We can see what Macbeth can see, she cannot. We know about the murder of Banquo, she does not. So dramatic irony is what undermines her authority in this scene, and so that should be very central in your response to a question on Lady Macbeth. And arguably, the loss of control contributes to Macbeth's reversal of fortune. Okay, so Macbeth isolates Lady Macbeth from his plot now. She's been pretty good at leading him until now, and without her, he kind of loses his control, and that contributes to his reversal of fortune. Okay, so let's look at Act 4. Now, this is very interesting. We're now at the falling action part of Freytag. Now, Lady Macbeth doesn't appear in Act 4 at all, but this is very, very important. So using this information, what comments can we make about Shakespeare's characterization of Lady Macbeth in Act 4? Well, the relationship breakdown between her and Macbeth. Macbeth isolates himself and isolates her. Does it signal her descent into madness? When we see her again in Act 5, she's sleepwalking and she's driven mad with guilt. Is it that Macbeth's isolation of her that has caused her descent into madness? And as she led the plot to kill Duncan, arguably her lack of involvement contributes to Macbeth's downfall. Okay, let's look at Act 5 then, so the denouement, the conclusion. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video now and read through this extract. What adjectives could you use to describe Lady Macbeth in Act 5? If you need a bit more guidance, continue watching and I will put some ideas on the board. Okay, so if you need a bit more guidance, look at these questions. Look at the quotation in red. What is Lady Macbeth describing here and what could it be a metaphor for? What tone is created through the repetition of 3 interrogatives here? Okay, we've got 3 questions in a row. Remember, interrogative sentences are questions. And what does Lady Macbeth reflect about in green? How does it convey a sense of guilt? Okay, then we're going to look at our final part, which is the significance of Lady Macbeth's offstage death. So, that could suggest how insignificant she has become to the play's action as Macbeth isolates her from the plot. But what I'd like you to do is read through Macduff's very short speech, which describes Lady Macbeth's suicide. And I want you to think, well, how does this help to add to her characterization? If you need a bit more guidance, continue watching and I'll put some questions on the board. Okay, so what is the significance of Macduff's use of the adjective fiend-like? Where have we seen the image of hands before? Okay, so hands are a motif. Motifs are recurring images in the play. And how could you pose an alternative argument that by killing herself, Lady Macbeth tries to regain some control? So pause the video now and we're going to end here and answer those questions.